This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by trainer Gary Lockett over Zoom. Gary, first and foremost, how are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you, and yourself?
I'm all good, mate. This is might well be the first time we've spoken. It's the first time we've spoken since fight camp. Last time we saw each other was out in Texas. So it's been some time. So obviously, fight camp was Nathan Forley. So how's everything been going since then? I know Jay recently fought a couple recently.
Yeah, I think about 5 or 6 weeks ago, wasn't it? So tough night's work for Jay. Not as difficult as I would have expected anyway. But obviously, it was he boxed a quality opponent as well, Marcel Braithwaite, and I think he boxed the best he's ever boxed. He really rose to the occasion, and he gave Jay a good fight, for some spells in the fight. But Jay ran out a comfortable winner in the end. But very good fight.
How difficult has it been to kind of keep people motivated through all of this, Gary? We had a brief chat then off camera. You've got quite a stacked stable, and everybody's at different stages of their careers. When you've got people such as Jay, who's just been and challenged Julio Cesar Martinez for a world title in Texas, 8 months later is boxing behind closed doors and not quite sure as to what the future lies ahead for him, what lies ahead in his future rather for him. How have you found trying to keep everybody motivated?
To be honest, I mean, it's really good in the gym because it's not. We're very professional when we start training, but apart from that, it's like a youth club. They're all taking the mickey out of me, and it's just it's a really good social gathering. Obviously, when the training starts, for a good hour and a half, then it's all work, but up until training starts, the half hour when they come in, they're warming up and they're doing their reps and what have you. It's just all fun and games. The way that I've motivated them really is just to say, look, unless you have a fight on the horizon within a few weeks' notice, then you're not going to fight until the new year. So I've been having the boys in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Just saving to save bringing them in every single day. So the guys come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We do like a team session, and sometimes they do a round robin spar. Sometimes it's just circuits, and sometimes just techniques. But just keeping it fresh, keeping things different, and changing things up all the time. And all the boys enjoy each other's company as well. We have a couple of guys that are turning pro as well, so it's all new to them. Chris Jenkins and Dix, I think they are all new to them as well. So because he's always taking the mick and playing pranks, so they've had to get used to that as well. So it's all, as I say, it's all fun and games.
Talk to me about the new additions to your stable, Gary, and what to expect from them.
We've got Kieran Jones, who's a super middle. He was a multi-titled amateur. He's turning pro. He's super middle. Kieran's expecting really good things from Kieran. He's one of those where you don't really have to teach him much. Obviously we have to make the transition. We have to slow him down. We have to teach him about a few things, the defense and different things like that. But he's already halfway there. So, that makes my job very, very easy. Then we've got Ben Crocker, who wasn't actually boxed for two and a half years. He had a hand operation, but I think he won 4 nations titles in the amateurs as well as a load of sort of Welsh and national titles. So those guys, obviously, they'll accompany the guys that I've already got, and hopefully, we'll get things back to, I say, normal, or perhaps we'll get some way back to normal in 2021 and have a good year again.
It's an interesting time for somebody to turn professional, given we are in the midst of this pandemic. When you have that initial conversation with them, Gary, what do you say? Because I could imagine it could be easy enough for you just to say, for the time being, maybe isn't the best decision because there's just no shows going where you'd be able to get on at the minute.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously the conversation that I have with young pros, they've got all these aspirations of turning pro, and they see the big bills like that AJ's on, and they see all the money, the cars that people drive around in. So my initial conversations with new pros except for the guys that have come from the GB squad who are already on the way. So the guys that have to go on the small hall bills, I try to convince them not to do it. I try to convince them to go and get a job and do something decent, unless they, as I say, unless they're really, really good and they've been on the GB squad, then they know a little bit about it. But I had the conversation with Kieran and with Ben that, forget about money until you box for titles, because when we're on these small hall bills, unless you're a massive, massive ticket seller, then you can forget about making any money. So it'll probably cost you money to box. So I've already had those conversations, and I think Kieran and Ben will both do very, very good with the tickets. And I think, they were good amateurs, so I don't think it'll be long before they prove their worth in the pros and maybe move on and move up a couple of levels anyway.
There's a sense of kind of, trying to think of a right word, maybe like realism, kind of hit home with them when they're hearing you speak so openly and honestly about what to expect at the beginning, at least, of their pro careers.
Well, to be honest, if you wanted to turn pro and someone just said, look, if I was you, I'd go and get a job, get yourself a good something in your background, a trade, and then probably think about turning pro then. Whereas money isn't the only thing that you're after, if you understand what I mean. How, if you were going to do that and I gave that speech to you, what would you do? You'd still want to turn pro anyway. So if the kid does say, oh, do you know what, you're right, I think I'll go and get a job, then he can't really want to turn pro that much, can he? So, but no, they've got, I think they've got good families and good sort of sets of friends and good family backgrounds behind them anyway. So stable backgrounds, as I say. So I think they'll be okay when it comes to selling tickets and standing on their own 2 feet.
Coming on to some of the other guys, Gary, we just briefly touched on Jay at the beginning of this interview. Moving into 2021, what do you think is kind of set up for him, for as much as you feel you can kind of think about given the circumstances?
Well, for my stable on the whole,
for Jay to begin with.
Oh, Jay. Okay, so Jay is now highly ranked with the WBC and the WBA. I think he's just moved up to Ring Magazine number 8, and I think he's ranked as well now with the WBO and the IBF. So I think the world, I say the world's the limit, but he's proven to be such a difficult challenge for Martinez that is any of the champions or are any of the champions going to look at Jay and go, we'll take him as a voluntary? This is the problem that we now got, because obviously I wanted him to win the WBC title, but then in the back of my head, I've kind of said, as a manager or a trainer does, when you're thinking the fight over and whatnot, and I just said, look, as long as he comes out of it with credit, then I'll be happy with that. I'll be proud. Well, I think he came out of it with more than credit, but his success turns out to also be detrimental to his progress, because none of these champions, like I just said, are really going to see Jay as a voluntary. So perhaps Jay has to fight his way into a mandatory position. But it's a great problem to have, isn't it? Considering going back 2 years, we had a whole different set of problems, whereas he was an unbeaten fighter, Commonwealth champion, and we just couldn't get him a fight anyway.
Moving on to Nathan Fawley, what is the plan with Nathan on the back of that defeat to Chris Billam-Smith at Fight Camp?
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very disappointing for us as a team, because obviously Nathan, he'd done everything right in training, looked really, really good. We had him up in in London sparring, down in Wales sparring, and he ticked all the boxes. He really did everything as well as we could, and it was disappointing to say, to say the least. But I think Nathan's a lot better than that. He knows that, and he's just going to have to, when he comes back, he's just going to have to rectify and prove everybody that that wasn't the real him in there.
What does Nathan still want to achieve in boxing on the back of what I can imagine is a crushing defeat for him? How does he go about kind of proving that he belongs at a higher level than what people may think on the back of a defeat to Chris Billam-Smith?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to prove that, but obviously we've just been talking about the pandemic, and so I've hardly seen Nathan. I've seen Nathan probably 3 or 4 times since the fight, but as I say, we've just been talking about the pandemic. The pandemic has now forced Nathan into work. He's expecting a young baby. him and his girlfriend are expecting a young baby, expecting a newborn. So Nathan's working out all the hours God sends to get the money in at the moment. So I've hardly seen him, but when he comes back, obviously we'll have a sit down and chat and see where we go from here.
Well, obviously, best of luck to Nathan with the young child on the way, the newborn on the way. You got me saying it now,
Newborn, yeah.
Gary. Yeah.
I said that.
Gary, Chris Jenkins again. Chris, as we said earlier, a frustrating year for him. He was looking to defend his titles against Johnny Garton. Johnny Garton retiring. He was looking for the Conor Benn fight. Conor Benn going down other avenues. He had accepted an offer, and then the team behind turned it down. It's kind of what's Chris's current kind of state of play?
I think he's just getting on with it. He was in the gym this morning, playing havoc and causing problems and pulling everybody's kecks down and taking the mickey out of everybody. The 1.5 hours or 2 hours in the gym is really challenging because there's so much messing about. But no, all jokes aside, he's just getting on with the job at hand. He's keeping himself in trim, and obviously his promoter Queensbury have told us that he's going to be out in the new year, possibly February, the end of January, probably the end of February. So just got to look towards that. I think it's a fight against Eko Esserman, who the board have now made the new mandatory for the welterweight title, which, as we know is going to be a good fight. I've seen Eko Esserman for years. He was on the GB squad, very strong, capable fighter. So we're expecting a very tough fight.
How much frustration, if any at all, does Chris maybe feel about the Conor Benn fight not coming off? Because I know how much he was up for that fight and how much he'd have liked it, and certainly seems to be would have been one of, if not his career highest payday to date.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but listen, it's like I said to him, he never actually had the money. I think there was a good offer made, but then the fight for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. And obviously Conor went a different avenue against Sebastian Formera, as we saw the other day, and performed really well. But as I said to Chris, listen, you can't keep crying over spilled milk. You just have to get on with the next job, and the next job is a mandatory of his British title. And should he win that, then he'll only have one notch left to get the title out route. So, it's a positive fight, and a fight that we're looking forward to.
Now, a man who was being rumoured and being discussed to have made a ring return before the pandemic struck is Enzo Maccarinelli. What is happening with Enzo now, Gary?
Have you not spoken to Enzo?
I have not, no.
No. Okay. So I think everybody's got it wrong. Everybody keeps saying that he's going to make a comeback. Enzo wants a 50th fight, and I think that's the way we should really approach this. I don't think he's ever spoken about a comeback. He said that he had 50 amateur fights, and he's had 49 pro fights. He turned pro. He didn't turn pro. He turned 40. Turned pro. He turned 40 a couple of months back. So time's not on his side, but he trains like a demon. He's putting these videos on all the time on Twitter all the time, and really regarding mental health, because he's a big advocate of that. Just encouraging people to stay active, get out in the morning, even if they go for a walk. With him, he goes to the gym and he trains like a demon, and he puts the videos on, and I think encourages a lot of people. I know he's a very very respected guy on Twitter and on social media, and it's really good that he does that. But I think, in answer to your question, the idea was that Enzo has a 50th fight, but I have all kinds of people saying, "Oh, Enzo's making a comeback," and I won't say what they say. They think there's lots of negative thoughts and whatnot, but like I keep saying to people, he keeps talking about a 50th fight, not a comeback. So he's often said he's not looking for a run. He's not looking to sort of work his way up the rankings and box for world titles or anything like that. As we said, I think we need to remember that he's 40 years of age, and if he does have a 50th fight, it will probably be his last. And am I going to support him in his 50th fight? Of course I am. He's probably one of my best mates in boxing, and yeah, definitely. So just to put things right, it's a 50th fight. It's not a comeback.
Do you think it's likely he will have that 50th fight then, Gary?
Well, I think this has been talked about now. It's been talked to death, hasn't it? I think for the last year. But then obviously, I think it was due to be March last year, and we had some discussions with different promoters putting it on. A couple of things were scheduled, but obviously the pandemic set in, and that fell by the wayside. So he's still very fit, but again, he's not getting any younger. So I think if he is to have this 50th fight, it has to be pretty soon.
We've seen a number of ex-pros look to make return to rings or have made a return to ringing. We saw Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. a couple of weeks ago. When you see Enzo, I don't know whether concerns are the right word or not, but let's say he has his 50th fight, he feels brilliant in there, he looks good. I'm not saying that he'd go on thinking that he's going to become a world champion again or anything, but in your mind, do you think there's any kind of thoughts that he might look to have another fight or maybe another couple just to see what he has left him to offer the sport?
Yeah, I think I think that's a discussion for myself and Enzo, isn't it? I think I have to do my job as a trainer and as a friend. Um, and he's talked about a 50th fight, but like you just mentioned, then the old thing of if he feels great in that 50th fight, is he going to talk about having another fight and trying to? But as I say, that's a conversation between myself and Enzo, and I have to do my job as a trainer, as a friend, and advise him accordingly.
Just to move forwards, Gary, on to some other boxing talk. Obviously, this coming weekend, we have a big heavyweight fight between Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev. Just your thoughts on it, Gary. What do you expect to see from AJ?
Don't really know. I think I don't think I'm being disrespectful when I say I'm not overly excited by the fight. If I'm honest, it's a fight where I believe Pulev's is IBF mandatory. So it's a fight that he has to take or risk losing the title. And not really sure who Pulev's best win is. He's got some very good wins on his record. I think one of the good wins I've seen on his record is Derek Chisora. I know I can remember seeing that fight. I thought he boxed really well that night. But apart from that, I think there's been a lot of marking time, wasting time. I think he's 39 now. Is that right? And I think AJ should probably win the fight comfortably. I know Pulev's obviously a good operator, but looking down his record as well, I see that he's not really a puncher either. He's more of a boxer. So I think AJ probably wins that by mid to late stoppage.
I was going to say, last time out we saw AJ box comprehensively to a victory against Andy Ruiz Jr. to reclaim his unified titles. Going into this fight, do you expect to see maybe AJ back to what we've been used to, that more of a vicious kind of approach, for looking for a stoppage, that knockout kind of style that we've seen, the power coming back? Or do you think that he may feel like being a little cautious because next year the Fury fight is there for him, provided he gets through Saturday successfully?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and obviously I don't think any of us know, do we? Do we see the AJ blasting people out, or do we see the more cautious AJ against Andy Ruiz the last time out? We don't know. That's what's the fascinating thing about it. But I think that AJ would be a little bit more cautious and be more of a box fighter rather than go looking to blast Pulev's head off. And when he uses his jab and he boxes a little bit better, it makes him a lot better fighter anyway. So I'd want to see him a little bit more, not gung ho, but I'd want to see him a little bit more positive than what I saw him the last time against Ruiz, because he was basically on the back foot constantly, wasn't he, and grabbing hold as soon as he got close. Don't get me wrong. It's horses for courses. You beat a guy with the easiest tactics that you can, as easy as you can. But I'd like to see him a little bit more positive in this fight and look a little bit more destructive.
Gary, you've travelled around here, there, and everywhere to be able to work at shows with your fighters. Given the shows you have been to in the current situation with a pandemic, fans being in a fight bubble, so you've been in close quarters to the person that your fighter is going to be going up against. How have you found it? How have you found it different to normal everyday life and to what we've been used to in the boxing world?
Well, first of all, it's quite strange, because obviously you have to get used to seeing the opponent quite often and seeing the other team quite often. the matchroom fight bubble was one of those, because the courtyard, if you can call it a courtyard, of course, it's just a small area outside. I kept bumping into the same team that we were fighting and whatnot, and we didn't ever fall out with them. I got a lot of respect for Shane, and I've known Shane for years, but it's just the fact that being in the same sort of vicinity as your opponent isn't very comfortable, is it, for anybody? But then on the night we're in the venue where there's no fans, that's obviously boxing in front of an empty hall or an empty stadium is very strange, something that nobody's used to, and you can hear everything that everybody's saying. That's the strange thing. Some boxers, they get into a bit of a shouting match in the fight, and you can hear them talking to each other, and you can hear what the other team is saying and everything they're shouting. So yeah, that's an awkward one, and for me, I'd be very happy when we're allowed to return somewhere, back to normal.
I know there will be 1,000 fans at the AJ fight on Saturday night, but do you feel that could influence kind of how AJ boxes, knowing he's only got 1,000 fans there, when these past 2 or 3 years he's been used to boxing in front of 50, 60, 70, 80,000 fans?
Well, I don't know AJ personally, but I wouldn't have thought that it would. I think the guys that are very professional, the guys at the top like AJ, I wouldn't have thought that it does let them affect, let these situations affect them. At the end of the day, they have a job to do. This is their job. This is what they do all year round. And he's in obviously fantastic physical condition, the same as Pulev will be. So it would be very surprising for me if someone let something like having no crowd bother them. I know it's different. Of course it's different, but I don't think it's that different that you let it affect your performance, or that it would influence, the quality of your performance.
Just a final couple of things from me, Gary, before I leave you to enjoy the rest of your evening. Next weekend, we see Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Callum-Smith out in Texas. Just your thoughts on it, Gary. How do you expect it to play out?
Well, I think Callum-Smith has been very underrated for a long time, hasn't he? I think he's done everything that's been asked of him. Obviously against John Ryder, I think that was probably, I could probably say it was, if you look at the result, where a lot of people thought that Ryder won, and a lot of people thought Callum won, I don't think it was his best performance, but I think that was probably due to the fact that he was expecting bigger fights, and bigger nights. And he probably looked at John and thought, oh, well, this is just a mark time fight. And as it happens, John performed out of his skin, didn't he? But I think Callum-Smith's a lot better than what we saw that night. And I think he can give Canelo as good a fight as anybody can.
I saw and I've seen an interview where Eddie said there's no rehydration clause. With that in mind, Gary, how key or significant a difference do you feel that could make for Callum, knowing he doesn't need to worry about making weight the next day?
I actually thought you were gonna say that was going to be an advantage to Canelo then, because obviously in the past it has been, because I know he really, really does pile on the pounds, doesn't he? But I think if you look at Callum, he's absolutely huge for super middle. And I hear people say lots and lots of times they really don't understand how he makes it into that, that 168 limit. So the fact that there is no rehydration clause, obviously that plays into his hands as well. But I don't really know how much weight he puts on, though. I've got no experience of what Callum or what Canelo puts on, although we hear the rumours, don't we? But it wouldn't surprise me if Canelo was heavier than Callum come fight time, even though he's a smaller man.
Final thing, Gary, we've been talking about fighters returning earlier on. One man who will be returning again next year is Floyd Mayweather. He'll be facing a YouTuber in Logan Paul. Just your thoughts on kind of the crossover fights, Gary, and your thoughts on it all?
Look, I think I was brought up to say, if you've got nothing good to say, then say nothing at all. But obviously, being as you've asked me the question, I think as a boxing man, I think we're all very similar. A proper boxing man, we don't really rate these type of things. It's an easy fight for Floyd Mayweather, and I don't know what else to say. It's a fight. It's just for the money side of it. It's great for Floyd. But what's he going to do? He could go in there and probably blast the guy out in one round, but he'll make it last for the entertainment value. I think that's exactly what happened with Conor McGregor as well. I think he made it last for the entertainment value. And do I agree with it? No, but listen, I'm just a little speck on the radar. So you know, I'm sure that most boxing people feel or have, you know, a very similar opinion to me.
Gary, we will leave that there now, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy the Christmas period if I don't speak to you before then, and of course for New Year. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
My pleasure. I'll see you soon.